Welcome to the Early Edge NFL Player Prop Show, brought to you by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I am your host, Eric Cohen, and we are back. It has been 7 months since the crew has been together. I am so excited. As we were talking about before the live stream started, this is kind of like the unofficial start of football season. I know we had last night, but I feel like my football weekends don't start until we hear from our true experts. And let's bring them in right now. I mean, if you haven't watched this show before, well, welcome, and you've missed a lot. But let's bring in our first guy. It's Propstarz. He is the number one prop bettor, as far as I'm concerned, on the planet. Let me give you some stats. If you're a SportsLine member, since week 1 of last year, Proppy has posted more than 1,130 picks on the site. He is hitting at a 57% clip, which, oh, by the way, is an elite sports bettor. And if you bet $100 on each of those plays, you'd be up more than $5,000. I just want to point that out. Proppy, well done. Very glad to have you back on here. And the NFL is your number one sport. And then we have, let me tell you, one of the great thrills that I've had this summer. I've been playing fantasy football for 29 years, but I have never been so excited than to be in a league with Dave Richard from CBS Sports. He is, the host of FF Today podcast. He is the number one fantasy expert out there as far as I'm concerned. And now to be in a league with you, Proppy, and producer Jake, among others, what a thrill. Dave, welcome back. Glad to have you, and glad it's football season. So excited.
Well, let me be the first to say I can't wait to beat your ass in fantasy this year. And that's something that we've never been able to really say on the show because we've never played in a league together. This is year 4 of our player prop show. And EC, you came along a little bit later on, but Proppy and I, we were here since the beginning. I know some of you in the chat have been here since the beginning. Some of you who aren't here live but are watching the replay, listening somewhere, you've been here since the beginning. You know what we're about. We're here to help you make bets. And I'll say this for you, EC. You don't have to bet everything we say. But if you agree with what we say, go for it. Have some fun. Don't go crazy. And let's win some cash this year. What was that percentage that you had, Proppy? It was 57%. Is that what you said, EC?
57%.
I did. Yeah, Proppy, you're unbelievable what you have done over the last year and beyond.
That's nice of you to say, EC. I appreciate it. The excitement, it's palpable right now. I really appreciate the kind words and the introduction. Couldn't be happier to be here with you guys. I did want to point out that Uncle Dave now has Hall of Fame credentials. Hall of Fame Uncle Dave. Live in the flesh with us on stream. So could not be more excited for the season. I am so fired up, guys, ready to get down to it.
Proppy, I want to ask you right off the bat, when it comes to picking player props for week 1, I kind of struggled because you don't have data, and I know how you feel about historical data. Well, this player, and I'll give you one of those stats later in honor of you for one of my picks, but how do you go about picking player props for week 1?
Yeah, you'll see a theme in my picks that it's a lot of rookies or first or second year players because the sports books and the odds makers don't really have a lot of data to go on. And we're basically speculating a little bit here. But I think there's going to be some tremendous opportunities, especially early in the season as the sports books are playing catch up. The lines get sharper and sharper as the season progresses. So definitely think there's some really good inefficiencies to take advantage of. My highest volume typically happens weeks 1 through 6. So not sure how high volume we're going week 1, but we'll definitely be high volume in the first quarter of the season.
Hey, EC.
Hey, yeah, go ahead.
Did Proppy say opportunities? Or should he have said opportunities?
Welcome to the new season, everybody. And now let's get going. All right, Proppy, let's start with receiving props. And you're going to go with a tight end who I think is going to have a big year. I think he was rated lower from a fantasy draft perspective than he should have been. And now in an offense where he might be the number 2 option. Tell us.
I love this guy. Yeah, we're talking about Cowboys tight end Jake Ferguson. I like him to go over 40.5 receiving yards week 1. I'm very confident Jake Ferguson is going to operate as the number 2 option in this Dallas passing attack that I believe is going to be top 5 in the NFL like they were last year in dropbacks. I can see them passing the ball even more if we look at this running back depth chart. Jake Ferguson really emerged down the stretch as well. Over the final 10 games, was on a really strong pace. He wasn't a full-time player until week 8 or 9. Had some touchdown regression. We saw that in the the playoff loss to your Green Bay Packers, EC, where he had 3 touchdowns. Had he had those 3 touchdowns in the regular season, I do feel that Jake Ferguson would have had a higher price tag both in fantasy, and I think we'd even see more hype around him this season. But there's a lot of opportunities for targets behind CeeDee Lamb. I really believe that he's going to function as that number 2 option in this Dallas passing attack. We know Dak Prescott really loves to favor the tight end as a security blanket as well. I also like this matchup against a very stout Cleveland defense. They have an excellent pass rush led by Myles Garrett. And what do you do to offset that pass rush? You get the ball out of your hands quickly. That typically lends itself to tight end targets as they're running a shallow A-dot close to the line of scrimmage here. So I like this matchup, even though it appears difficult on paper for Jake Ferguson. His receptions is 4.5. It's plus money. I definitely lean over there. But I think the yards is more attainable at just 40.5. I do expect him to average between 55 to 65 receiving yards per game on the season. Again, I really do believe he's going to be one of Dak's main looks here. So love Jake Ferguson week 1. Right out the gate, we're going over 40.5 receiving yards.
I love it, Proppy. Way to get it off to a good start. By the way, I just want to make note before you give your first pick, Uncle Dave. How about our guy, Jason Spector, a.k.a. the Speculator, in the chat? We haven't seen him in a while. My tag team partner from all the old early Edge and 5. Good to have you in here. And by the way, if you're a SportsLine member, check out his AI props. These things are absolute gold. I will reference them throughout the show. If you are not a SportsLine member and want to see all these picks, Proppies, Dave's, and Specs AI props, DM me on X or Twitter, and I will get you the best code that we can. That's what we do to help you out. All right, Dave, your first pick of the season. Now, you got a couple. I'll let you get both of them because you got a couple of receivers that kind of tie into each other a little bit. One that's in Buffalo and one that used to be in Buffalo. So tell us why you like the one that's in Buffalo now.
The one that's in Buffalo is Khalil Shakir, and there are over 200 targets that are vacated from Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis leaving Buffalo. Shakir is the only guy on that Bills roster who's had a couple of seasons working with Josh Allen. Allen likes him, trusts him, has faith in him, and that's why I'm taking the over on 3.5 receptions. And the juice isn't bad. You can shop around on this one. I found it at minus 109. He's going to be the primary slot receiver for Buffalo this season. And going back to last season, he had 4 catches or more in 3 of his final 4 games. That includes the playoffs, and that's with Diggs on the field. That's with Gabe Davis on the field. They're gone, and this role, like I said, is locked up. The matchup against Arizona, listen, I think this secondary is a mess. I think the pass rush is a mess. I think the Cardinals are probably going to be the easiest matchup for a lot of teams this year. That'll include Buffalo at home in week number 1. It could be close. He might finish with 4 catches, but he does have upside for a little bit more than that. Decent flex play in fantasy, and the guy who should get the most catches of anybody in Buffalo outside of Dalton Kincaid. Let's take the over on 3.5 receptions for Khalil Shakir.
All right, now give us your second pick as well, because now that Shakir is in a main role, one of the other guys got a lot of money to go south. Why are we fading Gabe Davis?
Because I don't think Gabe Davis is necessarily there, and there being Jacksonville, just to be a wide receiver, run routes, catch passes, all that stuff. I think he can do that to a degree, but we've already seen him fizzle out and be a liability in Buffalo. And so I wonder if Jacksonville, especially after they've got Christian Kirk on the field and what they've seen from Brian Thomas, both in their training camp and in the preseason, man, I wonder if between those 2 wide receivers and Evan Ingram, they just shut out Gabe Davis entirely. His over-under receptions prop is 2.5. I found it at plus 115 at BetMGM, and I think that's the one to take it at because you can find it at plus money. That's the one that was the most plus money. Say that 5 times fast. Davis figures to line up on the outside a lot. Remember, this is a Jacksonville team where Christian Kirk is going to be in the slot. Brian Thomas can line up everywhere. Ingram can line up everywhere. Davis, I think, is going to be stationary on either side of the field. I guess it's technically not stationary, but you get my point. Outside perimeter wide receiver. He's going to line up against Fuller, against Ramsey. Those are the top cornerbacks against Miami. And I think the Dolphins defense is going to be not so great to start the year. We know that Jalen Phillips isn't at 100%. He's expected to play. Chop Robinson, their rookie, could be more of a liability on rundowns than passing downs if he plays on those rundowns, but not somebody who's going to dominate that line of scrimmage for Jacksonville and Trevor Lawrence. I just think Lawrence can have the targets funneled to Christian Kirk, to Evan Ingram. Those guys aren't terrible for the overplayer props, but I'm going to fade Gabe Davis because I don't think that he's going to be an integral part of the offense for Jacksonville under 2.5 receptions.
And we know, we talked that we had our draft shows that we did. Proppy loves himself some Brian Thomas. I have a feeling later in the year that we'll be seeing some Brian Thomas props from Proppy. Now, speaking Proppy, I don't want you to get mad at me this early in the show, but I'm going to give you some logic. I know how you feel about it's week 1. You gotta throw me a bone here. Devontae Adams over 71.5 receiving yards at -115. So he has a better QB this year, I think, if you want to consider Gardner Minshew over Aiden O'Connell. I mean, we're not. I know I'm splitting hairs there. Regardless, this is about volume. He had a 33% target share last year. Feel pretty good that he's going to get something similar this year now that he's healthy. But in 4 games against the Chargers, as a member of the Raiders, he's gone for 141, 177, 101, and 75 yards, all over this total. I mean, I'm probably grasping at straws. I promise I won't do as much of this Proppy during the year, but I'm going with Devontae Adams week 1 over 71.5 yards. Just any quick thoughts on that before we get to your other picks?
I think he's a good bet week 1. I think Devontae Adams, as the season progresses, may slow down, may get nicked up. We may see Brock Bowers emerge as well as a viable target in that offense. But out the gate, I think Devontae Adams should command a healthy target share. And while he's healthy, he should be pretty effective in the offense.
Now, we referenced rookie receivers, and you said you like to capitalize on those early in the season. And you have a pair, starting with a player that I know you absolutely love. You targeted all over dynasty leagues and rookie drafts and in non-dynasty leagues. And he's probably the Chargers' number 1 or number 2 receiver in Ladd McConkey. Where does he stand for you this week?
Yeah, I love him this week. Right out the gate, I'm going over 36.5 receiving yards for Ladd McConkey, who I think is going to function as the Chargers' number 1 wide receiver. I think there's a narrative with Ladd McConkey that he's sort of a scrappy slot receiver, but that wasn't the case. He was actually very effective lining up on the outside at Georgia. Didn't really line up in the slot all that often, runs a very diverse route tree. I expect that to be applicable as well to the Chargers, who have about a gazillion targets vacated in the offense. As we know, no Keenan Allen, no Mike Williams, no Austin Eckler, no Gerald Everett. Basically, their entire skill position depth chart has vacated the offense. So tons of opportunity here in this Chargers offense, coordinated by Greg Roman, who traditionally runs the football quite a bit, but I think it's a bit of an overreaction. We think the Chargers is going to run the football nonstop. I do think they're going to be effective throwing the football as well. I think this is the best offensive line that Justin Herbert's had since entering the NFL. I think that protection will allow some routes to develop down the field. Justin Herbert has had a very shallow ADOT since entering the league, so I think he's going to be a more effective downfield passer. I also think Ladd McConkey is going to be running routes all over the place, short, intermediate, and deep. I expect him to function as the number 1 option in the Chargers offense. It's also a plus matchup against the Raiders secondary as well. Even if Josh Palmer initially is drawing more targets, I still think this is low enough at just 36.5 yards that he can easily get home in just 2 or 3 receptions. So I like Ladd McConkey quite a bit right out the gate. We're going over 36.5 receiving yards. You want my other rookie receiver right now?
Yeah, and I really like this one too. Adonai Mitchell from the Colts. Now, Josh Downs, I don't think he's going to play. Am I right, Dave, that he's out
Correct.
This week? Okay.
He's not going to play. He's out.
All right. So now we have an opportunity for a guy in Mitchell who's a speedster. Why do you like him, Proppy?
I've actually shifted. Initially, I thought Adonai Mitchell was a bit of a reach when the Colts took him in the draft. But watching his performance in the preseason, I definitely have shifted my feelings towards him. I think he's going to be really effective right out the gate. I was also impressed by the way the Colts deployed him. They were using him all over the formation, looked very explosive, lining up in the slot on the perimeter. He was drawing targets in the red zone, showed good chemistry as well with Anthony Richardson. So I love him to go over 2.5 receptions against the Houston Texans. The Texans had a very stout run defense last season. I expect that to carry over this year, and I expect the Colts to attack Houston through the air, and I like Adonai Mitchell. As you mentioned, no Josh Downs, who is their starting slot receiver. So that presents a lot of opportunities with Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, and Adonai Mitchell, who I expect to have close to 90% or more route participation. So he's going to be on the field a ton in this offense that I expect to be very effective, led by Anthony Richardson. So I think 3 receptions is a small number for him in this matchup, which I consider a good one here. So I love Adonai Mitchell right out the gate, over 2.5 receptions.
Now, Dave wants to continue the rookie receiver week 1 party, apparently. And Dave, now this is interesting because this is a big line for Marvin Harrison. 5.5 receptions. Which way are you going?
I'm going over.
Really?
Over 5.5 receptions, plus 110 at BetMGM. This is going to be the new BFF for Kyler Murray. He's easily their top option in the passing game. And it's a tough matchup for Arizona, but more so because of the Buffalo pass rush than their secondary. In fact, both their starting safeties have changed over the past year. Their cornerbacks are good. I don't think they've got that shut down cornerback, though, that could erase Marvin Harrison or erase any top receiver. And I think the Cardinals will probably either trail in the second half or they'll be in a high scoring game. And that means that either way, it's a good pace for the Cardinals and it'll work out for Harrison. Here are the numbers that really stood out to me. And this is why I had Marvin Harrison as an early second round pick in fantasy drafts. Last year, when Kyler Murray was on the field, his most targeted teammate was Trey McBride, and he averaged 6.6 receptions per game. The year before, Marquise Brown and DeAndre Hopkins got a ton of targets from Kyler Murray. They each averaged 6 catches per game. 2021, don't ask. Not the best year for receivers in Arizona. But in 2020, DeAndre Hopkins was Murray's most targeted teammate. He averaged 6.9 receptions per game. The track record is there. If you think that Marvin Harrison is going to be Murray's most targeted teammate, which it kind of makes sense when you think about the draft capital they spent, and I know you guys watched him play for 2 years at Ohio State. I think he is arguably the cleanest wide receiver prospect any of us have ever seen. End of sentence. Marvin Harrison is going to get a lot of targets. He's going to be used right away in this offense. Over 5.5 receptions, I do not think is too big of a reach in week 1.
Proppy, I'm going to let you weigh in on that one. You are the rookie receiver whisperer. Listen, I've already done how many dynasty drafts and other fantasy drafts with you. I know how you feel about this rookie class, but you are not as big of a Harrison guy. What do you think of Dave's pick this week?
I like Dave's pick. I do think that he made a really solid argument regarding the matchup. The Arizona likely to be trailing from behind, likely to throw the ball quite a bit in the matchup. I do think it's favorable against Buffalo as well. I do think Marvin Harrison's going to have instant success. He's an extremely polished route runner. He's a very developed prospect. I don't think he has the ceiling that a Malik Neighbors has personally, who I think was my top-rated wide receiver coming into this rookie class. I think Malik Neighbors is the most dynamic, explosive wide receiver rookie I've ever seen play. But I think Marvin Harrison is obviously an exceptional prospect in his own right, and he's going to be great right out the gate. Again, maybe not the same ceiling as a Malik Neighbors, because I don't think he'll have the same success downfield with the explosiveness, but I do think he's going to be just an absolutely wonderful technician, route runner, and his ability to catch over the middle, close to the line of scrimmage will be second to none.
Dave, what's interesting to me is that Neighbors has also an over of 5.5 receptions, but that's at minus money against Minnesota. And I think it's not that far off of a matchup, and it's with a worse quarterback. So this is just thinking about 2 rookie wide receivers. Everybody has a different opinion between Harrison or Neighbors. I don't know if I could disagree with you on the ceiling part, but I can definitely say that Marvin Harrison has the higher floor. I think he's a much safer option long-term for Arizona than Malik Neighbors would be. But here they are. They both have an over-under of 5.5 receptions, but only one of these guys is at plus money. And I'm going to take Marvin Harrison there for sure.
Yeah, and what's interesting, Dave, is in your fantasy rankings, the PPR rankings at CBSSports.com, you have Neighbors as 13 this week, which is higher than I've seen anybody else rank him. So go ahead, Proppy.
I like Neighbors as the top 12 option this week. I think, again, it's going to be clear that he's going to be the focal point of the Giants' passing attack. I don't think Daniel Jones is nearly as bad as some people believe that he is. I also have some confidence in Brian Daboll offense as well. I think Malik Neighbors is just going to just be exceptional right out the gate. I think we're going to see a season similar to Odell Beckham, who I think he compares somewhat favorably to. Yeah, I think he's going to be absolutely dominant right out the gate. If I'm playing Malik Neighbors props, though, I'm playing yardage because of his ability to break off big plays and win downfield. I don't like the volume approach with him. I like Dave taking the volume approach with Harrison. With Neighbors, I'd be focused on his yards here because I believe he has triple-digit upside. He only needs a couple grabs, in my opinion, to eclipse 60 yards.
I see 64.5, and it's very juicy. So I would shop around on that if you were inclined to take the over on Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, and one thing I've noticed about these week one lines, they're all over the place. Like I've seen differences of 5 yards, on some of my other plays. I found one that was 5 yards different from sports books. So make sure to shop around, find the best sports book. All right, Jake, you have one more pick, and you're going to Chicago here, a free agent acquisition who's not a receiver, but you're still going to have fun with receiving yards. Tell us why.
It's DeAndre Swift going over 11.5 receiving yards at -123. Chicago added him to bring this new dimension to their passing game, and this is a terrific matchup for them to try it. When you look at that Titans defense on paper, the defensive tackles that they've got are outstanding. Not only is it Jeffrey Simmons, but rookie T'Vondre Sweat. That's a lot of meat in the middle of that defense, and I think that that's going to force Chicago to attack the edges of Tennessee, and I think that they are a liability there, and that's an area that DeAndre Swift can attack. So lots of short catches out of the backfield. You saw in the preseason the little flick pass that Caleb Williams had to him. That was designed, by the way. That was a designed screen to DeAndre Swift, and he took it 40-plus yards in a preseason game. Could very easily do that in every game this year for Chicago, and that was on a design screen. There will be some undesigned plays because that's what Caleb Williams does. When things go awry in the pocket, he goes out of the pocket, and you see DeAndre Swift go and try and become an available target to Caleb Williams. All the receivers will do that in Chicago, and maybe Rome Odunze might do that a little bit better than anybody else, but Swift will get involved in that too. All he needs is 12 receiving yards. This is something that he's done multiple times over the course of his career. He did it a ton last year, and I would be shocked if he couldn't notch that number against a matchup where I don't think he's going to have much success running between the tackles, specifically between the guards, but hitting those edges, I think DeAndre Swift will be just fine. This is my favorite prop of the week, EC, over 11.5 receiving yards for DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I think that's highway robbery right there, Dave. That's a really good line that you found, and it makes me wonder, like, how did I not go look for that? That's why these two are experts, because they dig and they find the best lines. Let me tell you something about Proppy, for those of you that might be new to the show. When he makes a bet, sportsbooks will automatically, like, they'll see it. They'll put it on SportsLine, and they will change their lines. I cannot tell you how many times Proppy has texted me at night. Here, I have a line, baseball, basketball, and then I look at it the next morning, and it's already different because they pay attention. And when you're hitting at 57%, that's what happens. When you're the number one fantasy expert in the world, fantasy football expert in the world, or right up there, people pay attention. So go jump on these lines. If you're watching right now, pay attention, jump on them. All right, I got another one that you guys, I can't resist. I remembered as I was looking at props last night, I was like, this is an EC special from last year. The over 1.5 field goals. Let's go to Cairo Santos. Now, he was second in the league last year, tied for second with 35 made field goals. But he's going up against Tennessee. And Dave just gave all these stats or all these facts about Tennessee's defense. Sure. But last year, they gave up multiple field goals in 15 of 17 games. And in Cairo Santos's last 8 games last year, he went over this number in 7 of them. I know it's not the same team, but the Bears are more dynamic on offense. And if the Titans are better, that means they're going to slow down the Bears as they approach, the red zone, which means more field goals. We play this. This is just, I think I made this a 1.5 unit play on the site because I love it so much. And I will give a field goal pick every week. And at some point, I need to convince one of the two of you to join me with your over field goal props for the week. Dave, maybe I could talk you into it. You have to make kicker rankings after all.
Once upon a time, this was my gimmick where I would come on the show and put some kickers up there. And I was okay at it. I probably will let you know if I was good enough at that or not. But I kind of gave it up because it just got way too random from week to week. And especially in week one, listen, I'll say this. I think the weather in Chicago is going to be nice. It is September after all, so that'll work in Cairo Santos's favor. But we don't know a whole lot else about the mindset of this Bears offense, how aggressive they want to be. This is a completely different Titans defense. And when I say that, I mean it is completely – they just added a new starter in the last 10 days. It's a different coaching staff. Everything about it is very, very different. So I would be – let's just put it this way. Let me go into my little cabinet over here. I found the sprinkles. EC, put some sprinkles on it. Not bad, right? Some sprinkles on the Cairo Santos over. It wouldn't surprise me if it went over, but we also just don't know a lot about these defenses, especially these new defenses. A lot of them have defensive coordinators that are off the Baltimore Ravens coaching tree. And sometimes that works out, and sometimes it doesn't when it comes to red zone efficiency.
Now, if you want to bet all of these props, I know the best sportsbook for you to do it at. It's of course, BetMGM. And new BetMGM customers can sign up today and get up to $1,500 in bonus bets. Just place your first wager of at least $10, and you'll receive up to $1,500 instantly if your bet loses with bonus code EDGE. That's EDGE, EDGE. Coming up next, Proppy is going to give us, we had a question in the chat about Chase Brown. Proppy is going to give us some Chase Brown knowledge after we hear from one of our sponsors.
My first hot take of the year.
When Sunday football isn't enough.
Dislike that take.
Great take.
That other pregame show will put you over the top.
I'm all in. Let's go viral here.
Every Sunday, all the insight you need on CBS Sports Network.
All right, the chat is blowing up today. I love it. It's great to be back on this show. No Wu-Tang. I'm never going to kick a football. I don't think I've ever done it, and I don't think everybody wants to see that. No Japan. I don't have a season-long prop. Proppy, can you tell us why betting season-long kicker props is a terrible idea?
I didn't even know you could bet season-long kicker props, to be honest.
I don't know. Yeah, I assume you can. You can bet everything these days. But yeah, I just something to me just doesn't feel right about that. Let me ask you guys about Japan has a question about Mike Evans. Since we did not hit on him in receiving props, Dave Proppy, let's give this one to you here. Over 67.5 receiving yards against a questionable Commanders secondary.
Yeah, I'd lean over considering the Commanders last season gave up more receiving yards to opposing wide receivers than any defense in the league. We saw Mike Evans really had a terrific year last year. We saw Baker and him really show a great connection as well. We functioned as the number one option in that passing offense, really was built around Mike Evans. So I'd lean over. It is a fairly big number for week one. Mike Evans being the veteran that he is, I think it's a fairly efficient number. I'd lean over on it, however, but don't have a very strong take on it.
EC, for 10 fewer yards, you can get Chris Godwin at over 57.5. minus 119, so about the same type of juice. I think this is a phenomenal matchup for a Bucs offense that should be better this year than it was last year. They stabilized their offensive line. Center Graham Barton looks like he's a keeper. The offense has changed a little bit. It's going to be a little bit more in the mold of that Sean McVay West Coast offense. Godwin is healthy. How about this, fantasy managers? His last 5 games of the season last year, he averaged over 15 PPR points per game, 9 targets per game. I think he can settle into that same range when the Bucs are in competitive games. I'm not 100% sure that this is going to be a competitive game. I think the Bucs might build a lead and then be able to sit on it. But I think Chris Godwin can get you over 60 yards, maybe even 70 yards. Now that he's healthy and now that he's in a role playing in the slot, that might emulate what Cooper Kupp has been doing in LA for years.
Proppy.
Any concern about Dave Canales exiting this Tampa Bay offense?
Let me tell you what the concern is. The concern is that it might be better this year. And the word around Tampa, that from what I got and what people have told me, is that they like this version better. They like Liam Cohen to be a little bit more aggressive, and they think that it's going to work out better for them.
Well, and that's the insight that you get on this. I didn't even think about that. It's a great point. So thank you, Dave, for sharing that. All right, let's go to rushing props. Now, Proppy, I teased it before the break. Chase Brown. Now, he's kind of in a timeshare with Zach Moss in Cincinnati. The Bengals have receiver issues this week. Who knows about Jamar Chase? T. Higgins doubtful. I mean, you're down to Andre Yosevas, I guess. And maybe Jermaine Burton. Thank you. Jermaine Burton. I know that's another Proppy special. All right, Chase Brown, yay or nay this week?
Nay this week. First and foremost, I want to mention I'm bullish on Chase Brown. I like Chase Brown quite a bit. I have a ton of shares of him in fantasy. However, I do have some questions week one heading into this matchup. I'm going under 35.5 rushing yards for Chase Brown. First and foremost, if we look at Chase Brown, albeit a very small sample last year, he was absolutely dreadful as a rusher. However, he was off the charts as a receiver. His yards per route run was 4.46. To put some perspective onto that number, Tyreek Hill led the NFL, I think, at 3.5. So that's how good Chase Brown was as a receiver out of the backfield. But if we look at his rushing success rate, he was absolutely awful. I believe it was 25%. The only running backs that were worse last year were Dalvin Cook and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Needless to say, not very good. So I don't see Chase Brown, at least early in the season, having a big role in the early downs. I expect him to operate as a third down back, as a pass-catching specialist. Zach Moss was very good last season, very effective running the ball early downs, which I expect that role to continue at least early on in the year for Cincinnati. I expect to see a lot of Zach Moss on first and second down, and then see Chase Brown take over on third down. So I just think 36 rushing yards is a big ask for a guy who at this point in his career is a bit of a pass-catching specialist. So I'm fading Chase Brown week one out the gate. He's going to have to prove to me as a runner before I'm willing to take the over here. He's also returning kickoffs, which does not bode well for his playing time as an every down running back, which some people were suspecting, myself included, at least earlier in the offseason, that he'd have the number one job here in Cincinnati. So he'll be playing special teams, which tells me that we're going to see a lot of Zach Moss, at least on the early down. So I'm going to go under 35.5 rushing yards for Chase Brown.
All right, now, Proppy, I also had somebody actually reach out to me today and say, who do you like better this week, Chase Brown or Brian Robinson? And I said, all right, just watch the prop show. All right, why don't you answer that? Brian Robinson, tell us about him.
I like Brian Robinson. I think Brian Robinson is a very underrated player in the NFL. I like him week one. So we're going over, I believe it's just 42.5 rushing yards week one in this game that we talked about a little bit ago against the Tampa Bay Bucks. Cliff Kingsbury is calling offensive plays in Washington now. Also, Jaden Daniels playing quarterback. That's relevant for two reasons. Cliff Kingsbury actually designed very effective running games when he was in Arizona, and despite this narrative that he's an extremely pass-happy coordinator, he actually was slightly tilted towards the run as a coordinator. I would also add that playing with a dual-threat quarterback like rookie Jaden Daniels, who I think is going to be successful, is going to benefit Brian Robinson, who quietly had a very strong season last year. He also had a pretty large share of the rushing attempts in that backfield as well. Austin Eckler in the backfield, but we know he doesn't really mix in much on early downs, more of a pass-catching specialist at this stage of his career. The Bucs defense, they were good in EPA per rush, but all their other rushing metrics weren't very good. So I think this is actually a matchup that we can see. I think they're going to want to protect Jaden Daniels initially, and the way you do that is by calling a run-heavy offense. So I see Brian Robinson getting between 14 and 17 carries in this game. So I think this should honestly be closer to 55 yards. I think 42.5 yards is 10 to 12 yards too low. I think this is a really good look. This is one of my favorite looks week one. It's Brian Robinson over 42.5 rushing yards.
All right, Dave, you don't have any running back props, but we have some questions. So I'm throwing them to you here. Get ready for a trio. Najee Harris, over or under 55.5 rushing yards?
I'm staying away from everything Steelers, and that'll certainly be double for the running backs if it's Justin Fields under center for them.
Zamir White, a guy that actually over the last few weeks I've kind of grown more bullish on, 54.5 against the Chargers. Yay or nay?
I'm going to stay away from that one too. I still believe that he's going to be the feature back for Las Vegas, and certainly he's got the potential to go over that number against almost anybody he plays. But I kind of want to see this offense in Las Vegas first.
All right, and Skip has a good one in the chat. Bo Nix, over 18.5 rushing yards. Thoughts?
Oh, yeah. That's one I would definitely take. I saw him play in the preseason against Indianapolis, and that's going to be a part of his game. He will work off the RPO a little bit. He will run a little bit. He's not afraid to bounce out of the pocket. And if he doesn't see anybody open downfield, and I would trust him with his vision, he will take off and add some runs. I'm curious what his rush attempt number is, but I think I'm going to like that number that you gave me a little bit more for Bo Nix.
All right. Well, speaking of that same game, I want to play Kenneth Walker on the other side. Now, this number I've seen in multiple places, anywhere between 79.5, 82.5, something like that. I'm going to roll with 79.5 here at minus 111. His over 79.5 rushing plus receiving yards. Now, he played in 15 games last year, and he was only over this in 5. So why is the line so high? Because the Broncos allowed the third most rushing yards per game last year and gave up a league high 5.2 yards per carry. Now, my man Spector's AI model says 101 total yards, because I think we're going to see a lot of touches from Kenneth Walker. He dominated Zach Charbonnet in practices and during the preseason. I think he gets 20 or more touches, and he has the second most runs of 20 or more yards over the last 2 years. Bad defense, good running back. Proppy was the one that kind of convinced me about Kenneth Walker earlier in the summer. I was not necessarily a fan, and you told me, Proppy, just wait, this guy's going to break out. And then you and I made a trade the other week in one of our dynasty leagues where, as a large trade, we won't get into that, but I got Kenneth Walker. So now I'm in. Do you like it, Proppy?
I do like Kenneth Walker quite a bit right out the gate. I believe that he'll be heavily involved. I think the chatter all offseason was that he was really the star of the Seahawks training camp and offseason. The coaches just raved about him all offseason long. So, yeah, I expect Kenneth Walker to be a 3-down running back, have some heavy workloads. And, I think he has high RB2 upside in week 1. It's a great matchup.
Now, I played a rushing receiving yards prop, and so did you, with a running back that I don't like for the season, but in week 1, pretty darn good matchup.
I love this running back for the season. So we're head-to-head here, EC, and it's James Cook. I'm going over 83.5 combined rushing and receiving yards. This may be my favorite prop of the week. I just think James Cook is going to be the focal point of this Buffalo offense. We saw a real shift in the offensive mentality when Ken Dorsey vacated the offense as the coordinator and Joe Brady took over last year. James Cook quietly had 1,600 scrimmage yards, 1,150 rushing yards with 500 receiving, or just under 500 yards receiving yards. He's a 3-down back that's going to be heavily involved. Dave talked about it earlier. All the offenses, or all the targets that have vacated this offense with Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. So I think we're going to see a heavy dose of James Cook, and you cannot ask for a better matchup than the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals were absolutely dreadful versus the pass and the rush last year, ranking bottom 5 in nearly every single defensive metric. They look even worse on paper. There are question marks just all over this Cardinals defense. They project to be as bad as any defense in the NFL. So this could be a real statement game for James Cook, who I would argue that he'll be Josh Allen's most trusted target, arguably. Josh Allen's very comfortable throwing to James Cook. James Cook, a very capable receiver out of the backfield, which is why I'm choosing to attack the combo line here, even though I like the over in both his rushing and receiving yards. So I love this matchup for James Cook. I think if he ends up being as good as I think he will be, this looks like a statement game for him week 1 against the Cardinals.
Now, wait a second. You said that you think that James Cook could be Josh Allen's number 1 target. Dave, I think Dalton Kincaid will end up being Josh Allen's number 1 target, potentially, and Khalil Shakir. Go ahead, Proppy. Yeah.
Not his number 1 target. I said his most trusted target. There's a difference there. I think Dalton Kincaid will lead the team in targets, but I think James Cook will be looked at by Josh Allen on third downs and in tough spots to come up with receptions. He's played more with James Cook than any player on this offense, and he definitely trusts him. And I think James Cook's role has only expanded. The only thing with James Cook, he's exceptional between the 20s. He has a career average of over 5 yards a carry. It's just the goal line work. If he gets the goal line work, he's going to be a top 12 running back in fantasy. But from a yardage standpoint, this guy is pretty much as good as it gets, in my opinion. I absolutely love James Cook. I am so bullish on James Cook this season.
All right, Dave, are you buying James Cook like Proppy, or are you selling like me? Just in general for the season, not this week, but just in general.
Sure. I'm selling. And it's because I think that the Bills, I think they love James Cook, but I think to say that the offense is going to revolve around him is doing a great disservice to a guy named Josh Allen, who lives in Western New York. Listen, Cook was probably nailed this part of it to a degree. The coordinator change. When they went away, they kicked Ken Dorsey to the curb. How dare they do that to a Miami Hurricane? But they gave Joe Brady the job in midseason last year. And James Cook came in, and he was very good until he wasn't. And those final 5 games stick out like a sore thumb. That includes the playoffs. He had 332 total yards despite 97 total touches over 5 games. And so I wonder if he started to slow down, maybe broke down toward the end of the year. I think he's going to get some help. And I think that's the point of what Ray Davis is there for. Not to say that Ray Davis is about to splurge into a 50-50 split with James Cook, but I think he's going to take some work away. And that'll include some work in the red zone, short yardage. I got a perfect look at Ray Davis at the Senior Bowl back in January, and I think he is NFL ready as far as being a complimentary running back, someone who belongs in the league. He's 25 years old, so he's not going to be a feature back anytime soon. So James Cook has that role safe. I just don't know, A, if he's going to be able to do it week after week after week, and B, we've been talking for years about a running back. Oh, if he could just get the short yardage touchdowns. Oh, if he could just get the work in Buffalo. I think it's clear that as long as Josh Allen is there, it's really hard for a running back to be dominant in Buffalo. And I don't think James Cook is the guy. And here's the last point. There was an event I went to this offseason. I shared an elevator with James. And you wouldn't know that he's a running back. Okay. Now listen, I am not a shapely man. I am not a professional athlete. And so judging these guys, I was just taken a little bit aback by seeing James Cook and not seeing, you look at some running backs around the league and they're definitely physical specimens. He's fit. There's no question. And he's fast, of course. Not that you can be fast in an elevator, but we know that he's a talented running back. I just worry about putting too much on him. All that being said, it's week 1. He's as fresh as a daisy. He looked good enough in the preseason. And if Proppy thinks that he's going to go and get 100 total yards in week 1 against a crummy Arizona defense, who am I to stand in his way? This isn't even close to the bet or the suggested bet that Proppy made where I kind of gave a side eye to. This isn't it at all. So if he says that he likes it, I'm with it. But I was kind of out on James Cook in fantasy this year. I think people were drafting him a little bit too high because they're expecting something different from Buffalo's offense compared to the past few seasons. As long as Josh Allen's there, it's his offense.
All right, Proppy, be honest here. If you were in an elevator with James Cook and he wasn't wearing a name tag, would you recognize him?
I would recognize James Cook, but I do hope that the James Cook narrative, week 14, week 15, when he's top 5 in the NFL in scrimmage yards, we can go back to the elevator narrative, and we can definitely mention how he looked in the elevator when Dave rode with him in the preseason. But I love James Cook. Again, I'm not predicting that he's going to have the red zone usage. I like his yardage. Both season long and especially week 1. And again, regarding Ray Davis and the Buffalo depth chart at running back, I would hope a 25-year-old rookie running back would be NFL ready right out the gate, because I do have some major questions if Ray Davis is anything more than just a short yardage bruiser.
I think he's 6-7 touches per game. The rest of it will go to Cook. The problem is that it's rare when Bills running backs consistently get 20 touches a game. Cook is the closest last season.
I think it's 15 to 17 touches, 15 to 18 touches in that Buffalo offense, particularly between the 20s, which are just lend itself well to high yardage totals.
What was the number one more time?
83.5 receiving and rushing. His rushing line on the season is 900.
Yeah.
Which I like quite a bit. Yeah.
Sure. I get it. Yes.
The Friday Prop Show, where we talk about James Cook. Oh, I mean, this is as good a breakdown as you're going to get on James Cook anywhere. All right, Dave, Keon Coleman, buy or sell, just in general.
James Cook was cool, by the way.
Okay. No way.
Get away from me, you weird fantasy nerd. Keon Coleman. I like Shakir better for fantasy. I think Coleman does have potential. I thought he actually looked a little bit better in the preseason than I remembered seeing from him at Florida State. But I do think that Keon Coleman does have a little bit of a ceiling, first-year receiver, not somebody that can line up in all 3 spots, and Buffalo kind of finding their way to get a top receiver, an alpha, for Josh Allen to throw to. Allen, I know, liked what he saw from Coleman on film, and he told his front office that, and they went out and they got him. So we'll see how it works out.
Pretty cool that as we're doing this show, we have one of the great experts that SportsLine has. You see him all over NFL shows. The Maestro, Larry, is in the chat. Check him out. Thanks for being here. Great to just kind of get his feedback as we go along here. Quite the discussion here. I only have one more prop, and then we'll do the recap here. Derek Carr, over 226.5 passing yards. This is one that I saw anywhere. I know there's some risk here. The AI model that Spectre, who is in the chat, gives out, said 279, and it's a 5-star play. Now, new offense under Clint Kubiak, more wide open offense. The offensive line is a bit of a concern. Carolina has a rebuilt defense. No more Brian Burns on the defensive line. No more Dante Jackson in the secondary. I feel like maybe Kubiak is going to help Derek Carr hit his receivers more often this year. We saw Chris Olave have the most unrealized air yards last year, 138 targets, only less than 90 catches on that. I feel like now I don't think that Carr is a year-long play, but I think for week one against a bad Carolina team, yeah, I feel pretty good about it. All right, Dave, are you with me on Carr in week one, or are we out on Carr?
I'm out on Carr. I think that one of the reasons why Carolina statistically was outstanding against the pass last year was because teams didn't have to do much of it. And I would think that it'll be a goal of New Orleans to sort of show off their new offense and what they're capable of doing, but not too much of it. I'm expecting a concentrated target share for Chris Olave, and I would not be surprised based on what I've read and learned out of New Orleans that Taysom Hill ends up being a factor in this passing offense. So if you were sick of Taysom Hill stealing short yardage touchdowns from Alvin Kamara, just wait until you see him stealing catches from everybody in that New Orleans offense. Kamara will get his through the air, by the way. They definitely love him as a pass catcher out of the backfield. But I think that they're going to be able to hold Carolina off the scoreboard quite a bit. I know Dave Canales is there. We talked about him earlier. Don't want to say that Dave Canales is a bad play caller, because I don't think he is. I think he's a very good play caller, but I don't love the tools that he's got to work with for the Panthers this year, namely Bryce Young. I just don't know if he's ever going to turn the corner as someone who can overcome his height and other issues. But I would trust Canales to get him moving around a little bit. But I think defenses can catch up to that mobility, I guess you should say, coming out of the pocket, bootlegs, play action, stuff like that. I think it's going to take a lot to scheme up Carolina's offense. And I don't see them as being a high scoring offense this year. And that includes week one. And when the Saints are in a game where they don't give up a lot of points, I don't think Derek Carr is going to push it very much. And so I would lean toward the under on Carr.
Uh-oh. All right. Now I'm reconsidering my pick. Oh, I already put it on SportsLine. We're rolling with it. Coming up next, we're going to make our favorite picks among each other's. It's week one here on the NFL Prop Show. Let's hear from one of our sponsors.
It's a Service Academy triple header on CBS Sports Network.
All right, it's time for the infamous recap screen. Let's break it down. Proppy has 6 plays. It's going Chase Brown under 35.5 rushing yards. Brian Robinson over 42.5 rushing yards. James Cook over 83.5 rushing plus receiving yards. If you didn't hear the James Cook argument from a few minutes ago, rewind and watch or listen again. Fascinating intel from both Dave and Proppy there. Jake Ferguson over 40.5 receiving yards. Ladd McConkey over 36.5 receiving yards. Adonai Mitchell over 2.5 receptions. Dave has Khalil Shakir over 3.5 receptions. Gabe Davis under 2.5 receptions. DeAndre Swift over 11.5 receiving yards, his favorite play of the week. And Marvin Harrison Jr. over 5.5 catches in his NFL debut at Buffalo. I'm going Kenneth Walker over 79.5 rushing and receiving yards against Denver. Devontae Adams continues his mastery of the Chargers over 7.5 receiving yards. Cairo Santos over 1.5 field goals, my top play of the week. And Davis fading my Derek Carr over 226.5 passing yards. All right, Proppy, your favorite play from Uncle Dave's or mine on the board this week?
I like to be diplomatic here and give one to each of you guys so I don't get the side eye when we end the stream here. So I'll give one from Dave, one from you, EC. EC, I like the Kenneth Walker look quite a bit. I do think he's in line for a big workload week one. Excellent matchup as well. And I love fading Gabe Davis under 2.5 receptions. Excellent price point there. I agree with Dave. The targets are going to be hard to come by. Gabe Davis at this point of his career, not drawing a lot of targets, and he's primarily used on the boundary, which Miami does cover very well. So difficult matchup for him there.
All right, Dave, your favorite plays on the board that are not your own.
Yeah, I'm not diplomatic, and I think it's important to give one prop from the other guys so that the audience knows which one that I heard the argument for and I really fell in love with. And the one for me is Ladd McConkey, over 36.5 receiving yards. You heard me talk about going to the Senior Bowl. Ladd McConkey was there, and he was ditching everybody in man coverage over the 3 days of practice that I witnessed. I think he can do exactly that for the Chargers. And the fact that it's only 37 yards that he needs, that could be one that's in the book by the end of the first half against the Las Vegas Raiders and their shaky secondary. I think that that is a gem of a find from Prop Rudy.
Love Ladd McConkey. Again, he's going to dispel this narrative that he's a scrappy slot guy. It reminds me a lot of Tyler Lockett, honestly, his ability to play inside, outside, win on the perimeter. So I think people are going to be surprised by Ladd McConkey. Really diverse route tree right out the gate. He's going to be running routes short, intermediate, and deep.
Guys, what an absolute blast. Week 1, great conversation. We had Jason Spector in the chat. We had Larry, the maestro, Hartstein in the chat. Always appreciate having those guys support one of the great shows that we do here on Early Edge. Now, coming up in about an hour and 20 minutes at 7:15 Eastern, Proppy and I will be on with Will Brinson and the crew previewing Eagles-Packers. He's an Eagles fan. You can tell who I'm rooting for today. Oh, okay, right there. Yeah, on my shirt. Let's go, Pack,
There's
go.
got to be a bet between you two.
There does have to be a bet.
Well, hold on. I gave out on the site, I don't want to spoil it, I gave out Eagles money line. So I'm not – this game to me means not much. Dave, what do you make of this game?
That is a reverse kibosh if I've ever
Guilty
heard one.
as charged. You're right. Yeah. It's a win-win for me. I either win my play on the site, and Larry's happy with me.
A winner
the Packers win.
Oh, the Eagles win. I put it on the site. La-di-da, look at me. I got one in the win column. And if the Eagles lose, oh, well, too bad. My Packers won, though. La-di-da. My team is 1-0. We're in a can't-lose situation. But the people who are going to take Philadelphia, man, they're not in a no-lose situation. So unless you made a really good argument for Philadelphia, and I trust that you did, EC, I don't know if I love what I'm hearing.
You know what? I'll just save that for the later show. But I will say this.
Okay.
It is a win-win situation. No bets.
I
By the way,
do you think I want to hear this.
I do not want to bet with you or Proppy all year because I want to keep my money. I don't want to lose it to you guys. That's the thing. Two of the best in the business. Just want to say that. Guys, great being back on with you. Check us out, 7:15 Eastern live stream, Packers, Eagles. Producer Jake behind the scenes. Awesome job as always. We are glad to have the four of us back. We're all in a fantasy league together. Let the smack talk commence. So for Dave Richard and Propstarz, I am Eric Cohen. And as I always like to say, let's hit it big. Good luck.